It's time for Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, inviting the atheist, agnostic, and skeptic to examine for themselves the evidence for the Christian faith. We are all limited by what we do not know and by the things we think we know but are not true. Dr. Joe Mott earned his PhD at LSU and was a distinguished math professor at Florida State University for 38 years, helping to write 3 math textbooks and authoring over 30 research articles in math. He is now the host of this radio program, Defending and Commending the Faith. Here is Joe Mott.
Hello to everyone. Welcome to the program. Followers of Christ are still being called into action for defending and commending the Christian faith. Evolution simply means change over time. But since the time of Charles Darwin and Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, evolution has taken on a broader meaning. It now refers to the change from the single-celled life forms to the multiple-celled human being. The paleontologist Alpheas Packard, whose life spanned from 1839 to 1905, calls Lamarck the founder of evolution in his 1901 book. Darwin, while developing his theory of evolution by natural selection, did acknowledge the principle of the inheritance of acquired characteristics, a key tenet of Lamarckism. However, as we know, Darwin's understanding of inheritance was incomplete. Darwin later praised Lamarck for the eminent service of arousing attention to the probability of all change in the organic world being the result of law, not miraculous interposition. What hard science evidence is there that Darwinian evolution is true? Why are there no true transitional links? Since there are no transitional links to test, is it possible to demonstrate hard evidence of DNA mutational change? On and on I could continue to ask questions that evolutionists still find it hard to answer. Allow me to give a few paragraphs of comments from the book Dismantling Evolution by Ralph Muncaster. He records a statement from Darwin recorded in his book The Origin of Species. Natural selection can act only by the preservation and accumulation of infinitesimally small inherited modifications, each profitable to the preserved being. However, recently many evolutionists have concluded that vast numbers of changes have occurred all at once at various points in history. Unfortunately for them, this both contradicts Darwin's statement and also points to intelligent design. Of course, Muncaster is referring to the Cambrian Explosion and ultimately to punctuated equilibrium, which means that evolution took place in very rapid spurts and not by infinitesimally small inherited modifications. Certainly this does not fit the new Darwinian model. Muncaster continues. If the changes were significant enough to create entire new organisms, they were not infinitesimal, as Darwin concluded they had to be. Rather, this phenomenon seemed to be similar to the design of objects by human beings. They did not come through gradual, random changes. Given that neo-Darwinism requires gradual change over long periods of time, How do evolutionists explain the sudden appearance of many new life forms on Earth in the Cambrian Explosion? Darwin was rightly disturbed by the lack of transitional species in the fossil record. He asked this question, but as this theory innumerable transition must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? Muncaster continues. The existence of transitional species would imply that a creature was in a state of development between two species. For example, it might be a reptile with a partially formed feather, not a wholly developed one, or a creature with a part of an eye that didn't yet work. Now, even though millions of fossils have been found since Darwin's time, we still can't identify transitional species, let alone countless numbers of them. In fact, in the fossil record, body parts and systems are either fully formed or non-existent. Muncaster adds, in a sense, Darwin has been wrongly criticized. He predicted problems in his theory that are still problems today. And now, new hard science evidence is only adding to these difficulties. Darwin did well with the information he had at the time, but he developed his theory at the time of the American Civil War. What is harder to understand is why this 150-year-old theory, though somewhat modified, is still being taught as a fact in light of recent discoveries. Actually, when we look at Darwin's theory, we should remember his contribution of the idea of natural selection. Yes, natural selection seems to be valid in the micro sense, causing change within their existing DNA. We can even selectively breed plants and animals within their existing DNA structures. However, change between species has never been substantiated. Now, having much recent evidence that was unavailable to Darwin, how do modern evolutionists support their theory? It seems that, often, either they attempt to hold on to outdated ideas by the simple assumption that evolution is a fact, or else the evidence is simply ignored. In other cases, they explain the theory's many problems by reaching into outer space for answers. Are evolutionary theorists now so frustrated that they look to extraterrestrials as possible solutions to problems about the origin of life that can't be resolved? Moreover, this just puts the difficulties one step further away. It doesn't answer the question, how did these extraterrestrials come to be? In the previous episode, we discussed two areas into which flaws of evolution could be categorized. Allow me to briefly review their statements. First, there is an apparent contradiction between punctuated equilibrium, advocated by Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge, and of gradualism advanced by Charles Darwin. The main piece of scientific evidence for the theory of punctuated equilibrium is the Cambrian Explosion. The second area in which flaws of evolution can be separated is in projecting microevolution plus chance into macroevolution. I also discussed several pros and cons of chance. The Webster Dictionary's definition of God is the originator of the universe. Darwinian theory teaches that evolution is the originator of the universe, and God, if he exists, is not responsible. Thus, Darwinian theory of evolution teaches no God, or atheism, in other words. The third area into which flaws of evolution can be separated is the way Darwinian evolutionary theory has been used as the foundational basis for political systems like Nazism and communism. Those governmental regimes adopted the idea of atheism. In the words of Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State for the United States, the world communism envisions is a world without God. What were the consequences of the governmental regimes of Nazism and communism? Nazism caused the Holocaust, thereby destroying over 6 million Jews and perhaps 10 million Christians. Joseph Stalin left seminary after having read Darwin's book, becoming an atheist in the process. Ultimately, over 18 million Russians were killed under Stalin's regime in Russia. Marxism/communism in China under Mao destroyed over 100 million Chinese. Marxism/communism was responsible for Pol Pot's killing fields in Cambodia, whereby over half of the population of Cambodia were destroyed. Who knows the devastation of what all went on in North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela? Every communist regime always ends up committing acts of violence and oppression in order to keep power. Killing people without cause is a clear violation of the biblical mandate. You shall not murder. Darwin's theory of evolution also was the foundation for theories like social Darwinism and eugenics. You may know that eugenics advocates for the elimination of individual people deemed socially unfit. The theories of social Darwinism and eugenics have been used to justify discrimination and have contributed to some of the most racist social programs over the last 167 years. Who determines who is unfit? The government? The socially elite? The media? The legal system? Or what? Do you think those people are qualified to make crucial decisions about whether you live or die? What gives anybody the right to make that determination about another human being? The fourth basic area into which flaws of Darwinian evolution may be categorized is to observe that there is the concept of irreducible complexity, meaning that systems that cannot function unless all components are present at once. This idea is the invention of Michael Behe, the microbiologist from Lehigh University, and it is explained in Behe's book, Darwin's Black Box. The human eye is an irreducibly complex organ. How can chance, natural selection, and random mutation, the only basic mechanisms within Darwin's theory, accomplish the whole picture of sight? Darwin admits to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. That's found on page 168 of The Origin of Species. Allow me to close this episode by reminding you, exercise daily. Walk with God.
Thank you for listening to Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott, a production of Wave 94 Radio in Tallahassee, Florida. If you have any questions or comments for Joe, please forward them to Doug Apple at Wave94 at this email address, dougapple@wave94.com. And be sure to join us every Monday evening at 6:45 p.m. on Wave 94 and subscribe through your favorite podcast app. Defending and Commending the Faith with Joe Mott.